This presentation is about how drag queens of Central Kansas are civic leaders and social justice advocates. I'm going to begin by discussing the socio-political climate of the state of Kansas and how research sites serve as temporary safe spaces within this climate. I will then explain the research question I aim to answer. Then I will move into briefly describing the multiple qualitative research methods I use to gather this information. Following the methods, I will talk about the agency these performers have both in and out of these temporary safe spaces. Finally, we will conclude with how drag queens of Central Kansas use their agency in these spaces to be civic leaders and social justice advocates within their communities. This research occurs in Central Kansas, which is defined as, from left to right on the map, the cities of Junction City, Manhattan, Topeka, and Lawrence. These locations offer a unique look into how rural communities interact with queer culture. Although these locations are not the center third of the state, they are cities that offer drag performances and spaces for drag to be performed. Drag culture exists in more urban areas of the state, including Kansas City and Wichita. But the way urban areas interact with queer culture is completely different than how rural communities do. It was important for the demographics and socio-political climate to be similar across all research sites than to include completely different environments. There are multiple layers of intersecting identities these performers possess. In order to understand how these performers survive and use their positions as civic leaders to advocate for social justice, we must first understand the socio-political climate of Kansas. According to the United States Census Bureau 2015 statistics, people of color, which are racial and ethnic categories other than exclusively white, comprised 25% of the total population of the state, which means 3/4 of the entire state of Kansas identify as exclusively white. According to the State of Kansas Office of the Secretary of State Voter Registration Statistics from 2015, 45% of those registered to vote identify as Republican, and 31% do not identify with a political party. Almost half of those registered to vote in Kansas identify with a political party that has become more extreme in its philosophies, attitudes, and legislation against all marginalized communities. Finally, according to the Human Rights Commission State Equality Index from 2015, there are 0 non-discrimination laws or policies statewide protecting queer people from facing discrimination in housing, employment in the private sector, and education, among other spaces. Kansas also has a State Religious Freedom Restoration Act, which allows any queer person to be discriminated against at any time at the discretion of private establishments. As time has progressed, this state has become more hostile toward all marginalized communities, especially people of color and the queer community. Throughout the research process, it was clear drag queens of Central Kansas use their notoriety within these communities to create and sustain safe spaces due to their positions as civic leaders. I was further curious about how they use their positions as civic leaders to promote social justice. The subsequent research question posed is, how do drag queens of Central Kansas navigate temporary safe spaces in and out of drag as civic leaders to promote social justice? In order to answer this research question, I used multiple qualitative research methods to gather information from the 10 drag queens currently assisting with this research. I originally entered this community through participant observation, which inevitably morphed into participant action research due to the activism I was doing alongside these performers. Also, the decolonial components of participant action research were critical and central to how I interacted with those who assist with this research. Throughout this presentation, you will see various photos, almost all of which were taken by me. Photography is a dominant method of visuals that support the themes and narratives the performers discuss. I also used multiple interviewing techniques. These various styles all serve different purposes. There are some questions that needed to be answered by all performers, but there were other times interviews were simply natural, fluid conversations. There are multiple research sites used to collect information. Although multiple sites are used, the same performers were followed to the different performance locations. Juxtaposed next to the increasing socio-political climate of the state of Kansas as a whole, queer communities and drag performers have found safety and inclusion in spaces that welcome all sexualities and gender identities, whether these spaces are temporary or permanent. Two formerly permanent performance spaces, Excalibur Club in Junction City and Skivvy's Bar in Topeka, were created by and for the queer community in Kansas and welcomed all gender identities and sexualities 100% of the time. They both offered multiple weekly drag shows. When those two locations closed, two alternatives became available after some time. The Jazz House located in Lawrence and the Devil's Tail located in Junction City. Each of these performance spaces offers monthly drag shows. These are predominantly heterosexual spaces. Patrons are sometimes taken aback by drag performers and/or will still not allow drag performers or performances to occur within those spaces on non-drag show nights. Although some predominantly heterosexual spaces have become more welcoming to queer identities in central Kansas, there is still an opportunity for queer people, including drag performers, to be discriminated against when they are outside of these temporary safe spaces. Within these performance spaces, drag performers have high levels of agency and decision-making power. They are highly valued due to their abilities to entertain and gather large audiences. All of the performers who assist with this research have said they continue to perform in drag because they like the ability to command a room full of people and focus all of the audience's attention on themselves. They all value the agency they receive when they are in full drag. Two examples of this are the annual K-State Drag Show and Little Apple Pride Parade and Celebration pictured here. Both of these events garner large audiences ranging from a few hundred to a few thousand annually. But when these performers leave these temporary safe spaces, most, if not all, of that agency is lost. These drag queens, when not in drag, are not valued within larger queer spaces or within the increasingly more hostile socio-political climate within Kansas. In larger queer communities, these drag queens are perceived as too feminine or that they want to be women, which are both outdated stereotypes and inaccurate. They are most valued when in drag, doing the job they were paid to do. But outside of their drag identities, their value, respect, and acceptance decreases drastically. Using Marshall Ganza's definition of civic leadership, one can and will see how drag queens in central Kansas are civic leaders. They work to create environments that encourage others to get involved and become more socially and consciously aware of the socio-political climate affecting all marginalized populations in Kansas. The first two examples of how drag queens of central Kansas use their positions as civic leaders to advocate for social justice is exhibited by Brianna Jade, pictured left, and Allie Monet, pictured right. Allie Monet only performs in drag at benefit shows exclusively for local HIV and AIDS organizations. Brianna Jade is also known for raising awareness and advocacy about HIV and AIDS since testing positive for the virus more than 3 years ago. Allie Monet has been living with HIV for more than a decade. They both have worked with multiple community organizations in the Junction City and Manhattan communities, both in and out of drag, to raise awareness about prevention and destigmatization of the virus. Brianna Jade and Allie Monet use their notoriety as drag queens in central Kansas and firsthand experiences with HIV to advocate for social change within their communities. Three more examples include Tai Wu, left, Lil Kimchi, center, and Victoria Fox, right. Each have also worked to advocate about a variety of social justice issues in central Kansas through their positions as civic leaders and drag queens. Tai Wu annually hosts the Red Ribbon Review, a fundraising event for local HIV and AIDS organizations hosted by queer student organizations at Kansas State University. All three have advocated for inclusive non-discrimination city ordinances. They have challenged private businesses' discrimination towards trans and other gender non-conforming identities by going out in drag to challenge the unfair and unjust practices. Finally, All three have been a part of drag show fundraisers for local queer organizations, including Flint Hills PFLAG, the Flint Hills Human Rights Project, and the Junction City Teddy Bears. A final example is Monica Murray. She has worked with local and national organizations to raise awareness about prevention and destigmatization of HIV since testing positive for the virus more than 6 years ago. Monica worked within the Manhattan community as a Kansas State University alum to help pass the original non-discrimination ordinance that included protection of all sexualities and gender identities. Another example of how Monica Murray uses her position as a civic leader to promote social justice is how she concludes the K-State drag show each year. She transforms from her feminine drag identity to her masculine identity outside of drag, on stage, in front of hundreds and sometimes thousands of people to the song, "What Makes a Man by Charles Aznavour. Each year at the K-State drag show, once she has transformed into her masculine identity, the t-shirt worn exhibits a different identity Monica Murray possesses. Each year, Monica hopes she is able to leave an impact on the audience. In an interview with me, Monica said, "I think about how to end that number more than anything else." These other components of the queer community are things that we experience because we are a part of it. We experience it. We live them every day. But cisgender, heterosexual men and women who are a part of the audience each year often miss these messages. You don't go to a drag show for a social justice narrative, but it is so important for all people to hear this song. So in conclusion, the implications of this research are twofold. The primary implication of this research is directly from the actions of the drag queens themselves. The drag queens highlighted in this presentation use their positions as civic leaders to actively create and continue both permanent and temporary safe space for queer folks within Central Kansas. These safe spaces, whether permanent or temporary, allow a perception of safety within an increasingly hostile socio-political climate. Within these safe spaces, these performers are able to be themselves without punishment or fear. They are able to fundraise for local organizations that impact marginalized populations. They advocate and work to destigmatize HIV and AIDS. They embed social justice narratives within their performances. They rally and march alongside hundreds and sometimes thousands of others to show their pride or to advocate for policy changes. These drag queens of Central Kansas use their positions as civic leaders to advocate for social justice, which positively impacts their communities. The secondary implication of this research is to work to decolonize the research process. When discussing the various methods used, as well as the language within this presentation, I changed the research process and the way this research is discussed. These various tactics are an intentional way to create a more equitable distribution of power between myself and those who assist with this research. Subsequently, this is the part of the presentation where I challenge you to work to decolonize your own research process. There are a plethora of ways one can do this, but here are a few suggestions from my own practice. First and foremost, be conscious and intentional of the language you use. Work to use language with those who assist with your research and in how you write and/or present the research that removes some of the power structures inherent in the research process. Another way is to make sure the community you are interested in studying is interested in having you there. If they are, then work with them to develop the research questions and/or problems within their community. A foundational part of the entire process is working with the community to find and acknowledge the concerns about their community from them, not you. Then, throughout the entire research process, from embedding yourself within the community to gathering information, you should be conducting what Linloff and Taylor 2011 described as member checks, which is checking in with the community to make sure the themes and conclusions are accurate. If they are not, have conversations with those who are assisting you. Finally, When working on written pieces or presentations, continue to check in with the community to verify the way you are writing about the themes or conclusions are accurate. It is integral to communicate throughout the entire research process to make sure the information you are getting is accurate from those who are assisting you. Here are some questions to think about within your own research process. These questions should help stimulate you to think more deeply about decolonizing your own research process. These questions could also be used as a springboard to help motivate you to strive for a more decolonial research process. In my opinion, the benefits far outweigh the costs associated with taking the time to properly work with the community you are interested in researching, in not only finding ways to better work with them, but to also find solutions from within the community to create long-term, sustainable, positive social change.